Hello and welcome to the Empathy Podcast. This podcast seeks to explore the minds of those who not only understand or experience empathy, but of those who wish to take action, build, and practice empathetic behavior through conscious decision and responsible lifestyle choices. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, this podcast might be just for you. So sit back, relax, and use what you were born with. Empathy. All right, hello and welcome to the Empathy Podcast. Today we're delighted in the middle of the forest. As some of you guys can see, the ones that are watching on video can see, we're delighted with Cam, and he is from San Diego. He's an animal liberation activist. I'm so blessed to be here in the nature with him. We have the babbling brook, the stream right behind us. This is a beautiful setting, and San Diego's known for that, but we have been ravaged as a state recently by some record-breaking wildfires, which has been super crazy. So before we get right into the whole meat of the podcast, I have a couple quick questions to ask you before we get started. So the first question for you is, what does empathy mean to you?
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Luna. This is a hell of a spot and a place that I've been coming to for many years, so it's cool to be here. What does the word empathy mean to me? Well, I think empathy, from like a technical sense, is the ability for... Well, first of all, before that, like, we are complex, emotional, and feeling beings. And with that, we're able to abstract the experiences that people have around us. So I'd probably divide that answer into what is sympathy and compassion and what is empathy, since they're a little bit different. And sympathy is more of being able to intellectualize and understand what kind of experience someone might be having, whereas empathy is actually, to be cliche, is putting your shoes or your feet in their shoes and feeling what they are feeling, without the lenses of judgment and the layers of personal experience and someone's own lens. It's to just fundamentally have the feeling of someone else and understand that. And I think that there's a delineation or a scale from sympathy to empathy, where we can't be all the time pure in understanding what someone else is going through or what their experience of life is, and it's such a complex dynamic to begin with, to just be alive. But to make a kind of long story or answer short, the value of empathy is to understand that there is some context and some experience outside of one's own. And if you can kind of step outside of yourself and understand someone else's context and experience of life, you actually get a better understanding of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is definitely well said for sure. You put this one on?
Yeah. And it's 998866.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is very well said, and I think that a lot of people do have a trouble of distinguishing between sympathy and empathy, and I think that sometimes people even have like another kind of separation between like animals and empathy,
sure.
and or human and animals, and that they could both either experience empathy themselves or vice versa. They can have empathy for others. And so I mean, you can even say like an animal could have empathy for a human, where they feel like, oh shoot, it looks like you got hurt. You ever seen like a dog whimper, and feel, or a dog feel sad and like feel like what you're probably going through, and they're like, they know. And of course we know, like we could see, it's obvious when you look at a dog and you're like, hey, that dog, I think they're in pain. I could feel it. I could imagine the pain they're going through, because I remember when someone stepped on my fingers, or someone's, when someone steps on their paw or something. Yeah.
And I think a good example is just the contagious nature of emotions to begin with. And you can have a dog example or a human example where you walk into a different setting or room and someone is maybe exuberant or someone is heartbroken, and you can sense that. And there's the element of sensing it, but then there's the emotional pull from where you were to kind of match them and begin to feel the suffering or the joy that someone else is feeling.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, you ever hear the saying, misery loves company? It's the same idea. People that are miserable, they want to be around other people that are miserable, but also people that are very happy and joyful. Like they
right.
seek that, and they want to be next to those people that are happy and joyful as well.
Or your friends are rich and then you are rich. Your friends are poor and you're poor.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So the next question I have for you is, what was it like climbing on top of a slaughterhouse inside of downtown Los Angeles at Farmer John's, because that was a very intense situation. Speaking of doing scary things, especially for the animals, that brings me up to today's sponsor of today's podcast. Some of you guys don't know, but one of the scariest things that I've been through was suffering from autoimmune disease and nearly dying. I don't know if you know, but I was fat, sick, and nearly dead. The doctor said I couldn't work out, I couldn't go to work, I lost my fiance, and I definitely couldn't help the animals because I was not in the best health. I needed to help myself. And that's when today's sponsor of the podcast helped me increase my health, helped me look, feel, and perform my best. And I've been able to help so many more people, so many more animals, and be able to give that to other people. I remember going to activist events just like Cassie's explaining, just going to rescue animals, going to protest, going to do every single thing that you could imagine. And I see activists struggling to keep up, unable to maintain, losing their health, not being physically capable, running out of breath, having headaches, having these issues, having these challenges that is taking them away from helping the animals. I've even seen worse where people are suffering with diabetes, cancer, and multiple sclerosis, other autoimmune diseases that are taking them away from helping the animals. It doesn't have to be this way. That is exactly why I partners with today's podcast, is so that you can look, feel, and perform your best. Not only so you can help more animals for the activists out there, but also so that you can show thriving, loving, kind, feeling your best. And that is going to show through to other people. They're going to say, hell yeah, I want to stop eating animals because I want to look, feel, and perform my best just like you. And if you're going to eat vegan food, why not eat the best? Why not eat the highest quality? And today's sponsor, you can get $150 off your first order, which is unbelievable. Check the link in the description. I made a special video of the one that I recommend the most where you can get $150 off, and can't wait to hear how you love it. And this one is going to change your life, and you will be able to feel your best, perform your best, look your best, and be able to do more for animals, do more of what you love. I was actually there as well. I was on the ground filming. I remember it very, very vividly because it was only like, a couple weeks ago. And I remember a truck was pulling up full of pigs in the very back. And I remember right after that happened, people were chaining themselves to a gate to enter the slaughterhouse. And then right after that, I remember people on the live stream saying, hey, there's activists inside the slaughterhouse shutting down the line. Right after that, literally in succession, there was someone on the roof, or two people on the roof with smoke signals, and they were dropping a banner. And one of those people was you. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny that it was only 2 weeks ago, because it feels like it was yesterday, but also feels like it was a while ago. But more like even leading up to that is the campaign against Smithfield and Farmer John's, which is this huge slaughterhouse that's in downtown LA in a small city called Vernon, which is an industrial city. There's this Smithfield-owned facility, and Smithfield is a Chinese-owned company. They're the largest exploiter of pigs in the world. On the books, they kill, up to 60 million pigs, but that doesn't even account for all the pigs that aren't finally made into the food system, all the babies that are killed inside of the farms, etc. So, in terms of just horror show, one of the worst companies on the planet, that is Smithfield Foods, and they have this plant that's right there in the heart of Los Angeles. Direct Action Everywhere has had a campaign just kind of exposing the truth about Smithfield for, I believe, 5 or 6 years now, where activists have been going inside of farms, documenting, getting virtual reality shots of just simply what happens behind the scenes of the business, and exposing it to the public and facing the repercussions in the legal system for doing that. And I personally have had the experience of also being inside of a Smithfield facility and seeing that horror. So fast forwarding from all of that, we had a vigil where a few hundred people came to this facility to bear witness to the pigs, kind of a traditional setting of just giving the pigs water and looking at their faces, kind of seeing the victimhood in person. We've attuned to the fact that at this point that's not enough. That just watching folks die day after day, for years, almost a century now, actually, this place has been in existence, it's not enough. we're not doing anything and everyone's really comfortable with us bearing witness. So it's time to do something that kind of shakes the waters and says both to the public but also to the corporation that, you know, our end goal is to shut this place down and expose it, or shut it down through exposure maybe. So me and a friend Nico, we started the action on 2 Mondays ago at night, and we climbed the exterior of a 3-story slaughterhouse. And this place is known to be kind of like a fortress, kind of like the hardest place to get inside of, get on top of, in addition to it being a totally locked down weekend with armed guards and extra security since they knew we were there. But we found a spot and were able to use some of our love of climbing to basically scale up 3 stories. And, you know, it was definitely a little bit of luck and a little bit of, I guess, architectural luck that we were able to get up there. Going into it, I didn't know if we'd be able to make it. I didn't know if by the time we got up there, there'd be guards waiting for us on the top. I didn't know if we'd be spotted right away and we'd only have 30 seconds to drop this huge 40-foot banner. But as it turned out, we got up there and we're rushing, and then we got a little more calm, and it seemed like maybe no one had seen us, and maybe we're actually safe to take our time up here. And that's what we did. So we got up there, we were comfortable, and we dropped a huge right to rescue banner, which is a legislative ask that we have for the whole world, but mainly California right now. We dropped it underneath a light on the side of the building where there's this very illustrious and deceptive mural of pigs that are, you know, in these beautiful pastures, despite the fact that behind those walls there's, you know, vats of boiling water where their bodies are put into. And we dropped the banner, and kind of the most excitement that I had at that point was hearing on the radio, everyone get over to this part of Vernon Street. And then I could see everyone hustling over, and I could see the expression and the tone of voice of the folks down there that didn't know what was happening, that were so moved by the unexpected action that we were taking. And even in the course of just a couple minutes, I could see so many people lit up and excited about the movement that we're a part of and about the fact that we're taking action.
Yeah, I think because I was on the ground at that moment, and I was filming, and I remember thinking there's a lot happening at one time. Because it felt like all at once. Because I remember it was a very quiet time for like a day and a half. Because we really kind of stopped the business for like a day and a half, as far as their main part of their business is killing animals, innocent animals, and we slowed down that part. And I remember the energy and the atmosphere that everyone was feeling, and I remember trying to get the right good shots and good footage, you know, what's going on, and it's dark, and you have this light up top, you know, and thinking like, where's my zoom in camera, you know, and my zoom in lens, and like all these different things, because it was really unexpected. And I felt like a lot of people at the time, I think, were thinking, you know, we're making an impact, you know, we're making a difference. And every time I talk to people about, you know, whether it's Direct Action Everywhere or whether it's any kind of, you know, group that is fighting like this, most of the time they feel like this is very effective. This is making a difference. This is making an impact. And I think that that's exactly how you described it, where when you're watching the victims, you know, day in and day out, you know, it is just bearing witness, you know, and when taking action is a little bit different. And so when taking action like that, it does make people feel like there is an impact, and when we are making a difference. And I think that is the appeal and the draw to organizations like Direct Action Everywhere, for sure. So speaking of Direct Action Everywhere, why do you think nonviolent direct action is so effective at making social change?
So yeah, that's a good question. And I think that, you know, I'll kind of jump back to the first question of what is empathy. And we were talking a little bit about the variance between, you know, the sorts of ways that we can understand other emotions and the ways that we affect others. And if we are to continue down the train of empathy for what happens to anyone, but in this circumstance, non-human animals, pigs specifically, continue down the path of empathy, we actually feel a whole lot of pain and suffering ourselves, because that's what they're feeling. We feel, you know, in similar ways tortured by the fact that this is what's happening on this planet. And I think a lot of people that have changed their consumer behaviors to not participate in these industries that exploit animals maybe some feel like they're complete by changing their behavior, but a lot, I think, and I felt this way, feel silenced about what is really an epiphany about the world and the way that the world works and these businesses work, yet there isn't a place and a platform to express that frustration and express that sadness and grief and anger. And what we do is we just kind of tuck it away, and culture still oppresses us and suppresses our voice to, say that, well, we shouldn't be pushy upon others, and you effectively you just can't push others. And what direct action does is it first of all addresses the fact that there is tension that lives underneath the surface, and this atrocity and the pain exists, and it's just washed over and cleanly presented to the public. And as long as that stays the normal, and on top of that, you add billions of marketing dollars and a culture that is, indoctrinated to basically support the status quo in the way of life because of the way that they've been taught and educated by billion-dollar corporations and their, the past generation of that. As long as people's voices are suppressed and silenced and everyone is just trying to be polite all the time, that oppression won't come to light. The only way it's going to come is if the status quo is disrupted, and people get frustrated because people speak up, and that's what direct action does. So direct action isn't just changing yourself, but it's speaking up and finding a authentic, nonviolent, but unapologetic voice consistently. And I think I think you also asked a little bit about the organization Direct Action Everywhere, and that's one reason why I have resonated strongly with working with them, is I found that it's a group that's the most consistent, yet malleable in terms of being able to speak fluently and honestly about a subject that we all suffer so much about.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that there's been situations in the past that we can draw to
Sure.
where we have seen like this does work? Like, are there situations in the past that that, like, hey, direct action does work. It worked in this situation, and maybe it could work again in this situation.
Sure, and without even pointing to any specific oppressions and injustices in the past, I think we can all probably just think that if there was ever a time when an oppression and a normalized violence was so widespread across a region or country or whatever, there wasn't a lot of tension. It existed because it was profitable for businesses, and there was an incentive to do so, and there wasn't enough voice to forego it.
It seemed normal, natural, and necessary at the time, right?
Yeah, and there was always dissenters. There was always, advocates against whatever form of past historical violence that we can talk about. And in that mix, you have individuals and corporations that are so vested in continuing their business behind closed doors and keeping a mass general public that is compliant in what is, culturally normal at that point in time, that, those vested interests aren't wanting, they're not going to easily go. They're not going to say, oh, you know what, you made a really good moral point, and I think we're going to probably pack up our bags, maybe file for a Chapter 13 real quick, and then, head out of here and start making, soy nuggets or something like that. That's just, it's not the way the world works. It's not the way that it's ever worked. It's taken mass amount of people that are confident that they have a better moral understanding of what's possible, and they create havoc so that the world can ultimately make up their mind if they want to continue with the way something's been done, or if they want to choose something different and oppose an oppression.
In a lot of situations, there's a solution. So like,
Sure.
let's say you identify a problem, or you identify an oppression, or you identify that something that needs to change socially.
Yeah.
Like what we're talking about is there are solutions. There are solutions to these things. And for example, if you go back to the case with the slaughterhouse, a lot of people were talking to me online, like, well, what are you doing for the people? What are you doing for the workers? What are you doing how are they going to have jobs? How would you answer that? And what are some of the things that we did do in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, with any sort of like pivot in culture, you obviously have logistics that have to change, and uh, you know, the argument is that the suffering that would be imposed by people having to change their jobs, and maybe even a company going bankrupt, is trumped by the suffering that happens through the normal activities of this business. I mean, your question was about solutions. So,
Because when we were there, there
yeah.
were things that we did to help the workers. And what were
Oh,
some things?
sure.
Some of the outreach and some of the food and some of the water and some of the education.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, one offering that we had was providing a resource for the roughly 2,000 people that work at Farmer John's to have an anonymous place where they can safely report any kind of worker or animal abuse that they experience or that they see. And that's a resource that's just not provided by corporate. It's not a resource that's provided by their union to the same extent as we will provide. And it's a place for them to express their concerns in a safe manner and ultimately dictate what is done with that information. So that was something that we adamantly advocated for and continue to advocate for. On the other side, like to maybe even be a little bit of a devil's advocate to myself, is that we don't have jobs that we can give 1,800 people. I'm an unpaid activist, and all 200 of us, for the most part, are losing money to show up there. It's not like we can go and help other people. But what I have seen is that the determination by the animal rights movement is like kind of unmatched, in that if there's someone who says, I'm putting up my boots today, I'm putting my apron down, that there would be people that step up in the essence of community to help that person find a job. And there are groups out there, and there is also people's free will to go and just find a job that isn't stabbing animals in the throat.
Yeah, of course. I mean, even when I look to my past, when I first made this decision to stop harming animals, I was working in a place of violence, where there was normalized violence. It was in a restaurant industry,
Yeah.
right? And so I had to make a decision at some point, say, this doesn't align with who I am.
Sure.
The person that I am now doesn't align with this business that I had chose to work for in the past. So I just simply said I'll work somewhere else. You know what I mean? And I can understand that might be hard for some people, and it was hard for me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I felt like what others are going through, and my moral baseline was a lot stronger than the challenges that I might have had going forward, right? And everyone has their own story and their own
Totally.
situation. You know what I mean? But I think that is an option. It totally is an option, like you said, like the free will.
Right.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, and let me
Oh, sorry, you
let
wanna say
me
something?
let me add to that point a little bit more. Like, if we want to talk about just like the advances of what's the word? What is
Technology?
it? Not technology, but I guess technology in the energy sector, right? If we want to talk about advances in the energy sector, we should be running at 1,000,000 miles per hour to get people out of coal plants and setting up, solar panels, across deserts, basically, and on people's homes. Like, this is that's another emergency, and that's something that should be, urgently done. And we shouldn't be worried about the business owners of these coal plants. Like, that's not a priority. The same way with the companies that are drilling and fracking all over the world, we shouldn't be worried about them continuing to just exist and survive. We should be running together and doing something that in the line of renewable energy. And the technology's there, resources are there, but the politics aren't, and the culture isn't. So that's why even though we have a climate crisis, and you have a general public that's against oil and gas as a whole, we have an incredibly slow pace of moving towards new things. So it's not just animal agriculture specific. It's like anytime you pivot from one job or one industry and there's a moral need to pivot to another, it's going to cause some difficulties. But if people agree to the morals and we're guided by doing the right thing and just a basic understanding of science, that's like the most efficient way to get there.
Yeah, a lot of that comes from like the convenience factor, right? It's just more convenient to use oil than a renewable energy, or it's more convenient to use Amazon versus, go to like a local shop. Like
In some ways,
some
yeah.
of these industries become like so convenient, so easy for some of us that it
Sure.
becomes harder, for them to make that switch,
Yeah.
and so yeah, it becomes like that conscious and the education and all those sort of pieces,
Right.
yeah, that go into it, but also the politics and the laws. It's a lot of factors, right?
Right.
And so yeah, so tell us a little bit more about you.
So let's see. I live in San Diego, California. I've lived here for most of my life, but I've traveled decent amount throughout the country and a little bit out of country as well. I love traveling. I'm definitely someone who's like wants to kind of always be on the move, yet haven't done the best job maybe doing that in my life, and want to continue doing that. In a perfect life for me, I'd probably just do a lot of travel for both animal rights and also maybe food. Let's see. I'm into just like movement and stuff. I've done a lot of things like yoga and other fitness sort of things, mountain biking and stuff like that. That definitely brings me a lot of joy. Being with animals brings me a lot of joy, as well as working too, and both for myself and also for the animal rights movement.
Yeah, absolutely. So at some point, like a lot of us, we noticed the animal cruelty within the industries. We noticed it maybe within clothing or maybe within food or different areas,
Yeah.
of these cruelty. At what point in your life where you're like, I don't want to support that anymore. Like I'm gonna put that behind me. And how did you get there as well?
Yeah, I mean, for everyone, it's like this journey kind of thing. And a couple like distinct little things stick out for me. And I remember cooking I would always cook with my mom. So we'd always just be in the kitchen. I'd be on the chair, and she'd give me the big knife even as a young kid, and we'd cook a lot. And thankfully, I was in a family that didn't cook bodies too often. But whenever we did have flesh in the kitchen, I felt really uncomfortable with it. And I can distinctly remember seeing like the thighs of chickens and being like, I am going to be an adult someday and have to touch that. And I felt really like, I don't want to grow up in that way. Like that was a thought of me as like an 8-year-old, like I don't want to grow up and do that. And that thought kind of just sat there for a little while. And I started to learn more and more about health, watched a few documentaries, and was somewhat persuaded by the humane labeling that's on products. And it took me a couple years to shift towards like all of the humane label products, which means I was really just giving more money to the industry because these products are more expensive. But then when I was 15, I took a challenge for my English class to give up something for 2 weeks and then write an essay about it. So I was like, okay, I'll give up meat. And I was like, this was really easy after 2 weeks. And I already had some understanding of like the ethics side of it and the health side of it. So I just stuck and I stopped eating animals when I was 15, their bodies. And then it was a slow trickle because no one in high school for me was vegan that I knew of, or even like vegetarian eaters. So it was like a slow trickle for me. But by the time I was about 18, I finally like agreed with myself that there's actually let me backtrack for a second. This was funny because I went vegetarian and I cut down everything, and I was good with cutting down everything, like everything. I was like, I'm only gonna eat farmers market eggs. I had this idea that they were great, and I was walking down the coast highway one day, and there was a lady handing out pamphlets about veganism, and I looked at her and I was like, I'm vegetarian and I do enough. Something like that. I totally scoffed it off, and I remember that distinctly. But here I am. I guess that's the point of that. No, it was a slow trickle for me.
Someone that I was listening to their story, Nime Delgado, the bodybuilder, he had the same story. He was walking down, he was already vegetarian his whole life, and he had someone talking about veganism, and then he's like, I already do enough, I'm good enough, kind of like, leave me alone, I'm on your side kind of thing. Yeah, I remember.
Right. And it's like, I've studied this thing, and I've come up with the idea that these like free range, bullshit products are acceptable. Like I know a little bit, and you have this false sense of confidence about understanding the subject. But anyway, I started to learn more and more and more about everything, and I started just watching more like online content was really important for me. And then I finally like cut out everything and took a stance against like leather and all the other kind of like byproducts that aren't consumable when I was around 17 or 18. I don't remember.
And that was including eggs as well?
Yeah.
That was at the same time?
Finally cut it off, yes.
It was about the same time?
About the same time, yeah.
And then how do you feel like, because 17 is obviously, you were still in high school at this time?
It was like the end of high school.
The end of high
cut it
school?
off, yeah.
Yeah, so did you feel like at the time it was challenging from like a social perspective? Because that's usually one of the common things that people do struggle with. It's like, my friends are kind of not accepting, or they don't understand it, or my family, you know, or like we can't eat together anymore. Like there's a lot of like this social friction that happens. Did you experience some of that stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. The social friction that occurred then, and I guess kind of continues now, I was never tempted to like eat animal products to please anyone, but I was really frustrated to have friends predominantly, because my family's vegan now, predominantly friends that weren't as captured by the new information that I was learning as I was. And I didn't have people that were like, wow, this is horrible, we're gonna run into this new like different lifestyle with you. And that was confusing for me. And I feel like I started to kind of dissent a little bit from the high school culture that I was a part of. I was less into drinking, less into any kind of like partying. Like I didn't feel like I got a lot out of the social situations that I'd find myself in, and you know, cared more about justice and moral issues, and less about like what I'm gonna do in my life to get more ahead. And this is also a time when everyone's trying to get to like the best Ivy League school, right? And I was starting to get less interested in that and more interested about, well, what can I do to just be a good person? You know, like and I didn't feel like most people were interested in following that same path, and I got pretty frustrated. I just got frustrated and angry with, like maybe internally angry with the world, or internally angry with some people I was close with. Yeah, so that was challenging, and that is something that by no means has gone away. It's changed, but it's definitely something that I think a lot of folks feel is, you know, your friends are running the machine of suffering in some ways, and how do you interact with those dynamics?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is kind of interesting because I felt like when I went through those same situations, I felt like I might have lost a few friends, but then I kind of thought like, how much friends were they that, you know, to begin with, if they're not going to accept who I am now, you know, or you want to have like a battle about it, right?
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, I feel like I gained way more friends, like new friends all over the world now, that I would have never encountered with or talked to, and they have such unique mindsets. It's not that like a new friend is like not harming animals. It's like that new friend also has these really interesting perspectives about the government, or really interesting perspectives about intersectionality, like, or really interesting perspectives on all these different things that I'm like, whoa, you're so interesting to learn from. You know, not just because of you don't eat animals, right? Or you don't harm animals. You know what I mean? Like, it was so interesting.
And I think I think there's a lot of activists and like, especially like younger people, I think, maybe not, but that want to see the world change and want to see like the systems and structures of our politics and economics change. And we aren't seeing that pretty clearly, at least to the scale that we want. But people do that on an individual level with going vegan or becoming anti-speciesist or whatever, in that they grew up understanding something about the world and had to completely rewire everything, and change their voice, change their consumption, change their thinking. And that's a powerful thing for individuals to do. And I think that in some sense, you know, could be kind of just continued forward to change culture as a whole. In like some sense, it could be like an awakening for us to change bigger structures, by having individuals, you know, very like deeply reanalyze the ways that they were brought up and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, like, when someone hasn't seen me in a while and they're like, man, Kevin, you changed so much. You know what I say? Like, they say it in like this kind of like weird,
Thank you.
tone. Yeah, thank you. Oh my gosh, I've been working so hard. I've been working so hard to change who I was before. You know, like, I'm so happy now that you can see it. You know, and it is a perspective, right? You know, and I know it, and I accept it, and I embrace it. Like, I embrace the different. Like, I want to be different. I was telling someone, I don't want to be like everybody else. You know, kind of thing. So I do embrace that. Yeah, absolutely. So then I think a lot of us get to a point, and for me it was 6 months in after I realized kind of the inherent cruelty and kind of like the systems going on within animals. Then I was like, well, 6 months in, I said I want to help others see this, or I want to help others put an end to this, or I want to help make a change.
Yeah.
And everyone has their own route and their own reasons. What are some of the reasons that led you to want to make a change for others, right? And essentially be an activist. And what kind of things do you do to be active, would you say?
Yeah, I think I'm an activist, or like I just speak up about the subject.
Why,
Yeah.
essentially, and what
Yeah,
are
yeah.
you doing?
Yeah.
Like, so this is more to
I
encourage
gotcha.
people.
I've become more and more active. In some ways, less as a choice. It feels like I kind of have to in some ways, because it fills my mind. It occupies my thoughts a lot of the time. I'm in a personal space where I can't go to a grocery store or go to a dinner or whatever and not be thinking about the victims that are around me. I can't sometimes sleep because I'm thinking about the things that I've witnessed and experienced or know is happening. And in some ways, the antidote to that pain, not that it necessarily works, but one antidote to the pain is to do something about it. And I think it becomes less of a choice. It becomes something that you have to do. And like, their suffering exists, and therefore my suffering exists. So I'm gonna be working for both of us.
And did this happen like early on, like 17 age, or did this happen later on?
It's capitulated, as I've gotten older. My like predominant form of activism when I was younger, when I didn't have a community of bold and outspoken people around me, was to do a lot of potlucks and bring it up. But I was one person doing that, and always a little bit kind of like, oh, he's the annoying, loud vegan person, and so I quelled my voice. I guess once I found like a little more financial independence, a little more confidence from breaking away from some of the other like just social establishments I'm not super comfortable with, is when I have been able to like just experiment with speaking up more, and definitely feel more aligned doing so.
And what would you say are some of the things that you do to be active, like in your lifestyle? What would you say that is?
Well, sometimes I'll climb on top of slaughterhouses
Yeah.
and drop big banners and go to jail for that. That's like a really easy thing anyone can do, kind of. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I guess like simple things for just personal empowerment is talking about it when you see it. So I don't always do this. It depends on my mood. But like simple things like you go to a grocery store and you see someone buying something, you just talk to them and you're like, hi. And I've challenged myself with this, and it's like, hi, like seeing that chicken that's in a carton makes me really sad. Can I give you a little bit of information about it? And I'm doing it for me, kind of, because it makes me sad, and because I think that animal would want like someone to have done something for them. And even though it's too late, I'm gonna do something. So I try to practice my voice doing things like that. We also hold some kind of like outreach things, and that's pretty like global, where people just hold televisions in public spaces and talk to the general public about footage that's shown on the screen of animal exploitation that's endemic in our culture. I've experimented a little bit with investigatory work as well, going inside of factory farms and doing it with a camera and trying to get something that I think would be impactful for folks to see. So there's definitely a scale of things. Oh, and then also just it's simple, but emailing relentlessly like local politicians and local businesses. And I probably spend an hour or two, maybe 2 hours a week, and I've done that for a year, just emailing politicians locally and emailing local businesses and just giving them either information or direct asks of what I'd like. And for the most part, not much has happened. We've had little changes in our San Diego policies, local guidelines, but just trying to elevate the fact that this is a subject that people should be concerned about.
And then how do you feel like when you're being active, how do you feel like some people handle it, like some of the conversations that you have with people? Do you feel like most people are accepting or willing to make some of these changes, especially when you see, like, let's say you see it on a TV and then you talk about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you're making some kind of disruption, be like, hey, what's going on here? Like, why is this place of business, being targeted?
Yeah.
Do you feel like some people are receptive to that, or how do you feel like some of the changes are being made on an individual level?
I feel like people are either receptive or they're suffering because they are just choosing to stay so staunch to a system that they've just taken for granted as the only option. So no, not everyone's receptive for sure. And in some ways, I actually like people that aren't receptive, and I like the fact that there's people that exist that are really vocally against kindness towards animals, because I think it's really good contrast for the people that are receptive to see that there's very balanced and logical people talking about not confining and mass torturing 80 billion animals every year, and then you have another group of people that are just totally mesmerized by the gustatory pleasure they have of eating someone's body, and they will probably say some pretty awful things. And given the choice, the people that are receptive, I think will, it's a clear side for them to stand on, and that's all we need. We don't need everyone to jump on board. We just need more people, and that's what it takes, I think, to change the world.
Yeah, I had one activist that said recently, like, you don't need everybody to, like, stop eating animals or stop harming animals. Essentially, you just need a select few, right? A select number of few that are taking action and making that difference.
And think about this: all the people that support the exploitive animals do that because it's a system that they were born into. And if we have all the other people that are receptive, work on changing the system and enacting new laws and a new culture, these people are the follower type of people to begin with. And maybe not them, but it might be the generation after ours that, they follow, but they follow in a much more...
In just a new system, a new better system,
better world.
Absolutely. So would you say, is there anything else that maybe as we wrap this up that you want to leave the audience with, like maybe one big thing?
One big thing.
Or something important that maybe we didn't talk about? It's important to you.
I guess what's important to me is... Okay, well, I'll go back to the text you sent me earlier about what I call myself, and if I call myself an activist or not, because I think that's an interesting point.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm not sure if I even call myself an activist, even though I'm not opposed to that defining term. I just think that I kind of feel like I live life like the way that I should. It's like, given the opportunities and place in life that I have time and resources to be able to speak up for folks that are in worse situations. And I think that that's just what everyone should do. I don't think that that we're going to get anywhere if people are so focused on themselves and so focused on the next house and the next $1 million or whatever. I don't know. Our world's not going to go very far in this or the next couple generations. So it's just use your time and your voice are the most powerful things that you have, and use it for what you care about, and support other justice movements, and be an example for people to be open-minded, just listening, because it's the same way. When we went vegan, what it took is for us to listen, be open to a new perspective. So just keep that tap open, be discerning, but listen and try to understand, and move the world forward that way.
Yeah, I just posted something recently that said something very similar. It's like the best form of activism is like being yourself and being like a really good person, kind of thing. Like, it's really simple.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. It's just so basic and like really
and I'd also say, like, probably another like worthwhile point to say is that for like the people that are just like curious about changing their diet and stuff like that, changing your diet is like the easiest thing you can do. It really is super easy, I think, like anywhere you live, if you do it because you care about a certain set of values. The difficulty comes over time when it's less about your changes that you have to go through in your behavior, but it's about the fact that the reason you changed still exists in the world. And the pain and maybe the sadness that you'll probably have to live with, hopefully not forever, knowing that even though you're not directly contributing to the suffering, it's happening everywhere ad libitum.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's tough. That's tough as shit. It's not changing your diet that's tough. It's like waking up.
Yeah. Well, with that, where can people find you if they want to follow you? Maybe follow your Instagram or any places like that?
Yeah, I put half-ass effort into my Instagram, which is at Cammehta, Cammehta.
All right, great.
And I'd also follow Direct Action Everywhere on Instagram and especially Facebook. Direct Action Everywhere.
All right, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And let's have some fun in the lake.
Time to go swimming.
In the river. Kind of swimming. Anyways, yeah, we'll take care and we'll be seeing you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Luna.
Thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Please, please, please make sure that you guys share this with anyone that you think will find this interesting, and also make sure that you guys are subscribed, because I can see a lot of you guys are listening but you aren't subscribed.